today as Carnival or Triple contains elements of social liberation and ideology of the early Africans who were enslaved, who documented their freedom thesis in song, in music, in poetry, coordinated, synchronized, choreographed, and disguised in dance through stick fighting. The spirit of rebellion, revolution, and the desire for emancipation being portrayed through culture, the African drum. And so what eventually became Carnival was not just practiced on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, because remember, of course, it is the French European Catholics who, in preparing for Lent, as we explained, carne meaning meat, valet meaning goodbye or farewell to, so Carnival Monday and Tuesday were the last 2 days before the eating of meat, before the beginning of the 40-day period of Lent, starting with Ash Wednesday. So what happened was the African experience of celebration, revelry, liberation, and that ideology contained in culture was moved from August the 1st and brought to the 2 days before Ash Wednesday. So it has now been given a tone of the Catholic philosophy of preparing for Lent, or having this celebration just before the beginning of Lent, and then the African consciousness element that was sung about, lyrics that we wrote, poems that we spoke, narratives, choral speaking that we shared, ideas that we transmitted through our culture, through African culture. So they merged those two elements, the African experience with the European calendar, and also part of the element of the European festivities. And now we have Carnival today. It's called in Trinidad the greatest show on earth. Well, okay, but in what direction is it going? You hear the criticisms, you hear the concerns, the talk about Trinidad and Tobago Carnival has been reduced to bikini and beads. But where is the ideology that was at the foundation of what became Carnival? You see, what became Carnival was first celebrated on Emancipation. So basically, Emancipation Day commemorates the first festive celebrations of African people after their acquiring of freedom and liberation through the Emancipation Proclamation. And then somewhere in the 1800s, it was shifted. But look at the imposition that there was. We had Canboulay. And then in the 1880s, there was the Canboulay riots. There was always fear on the part of the Europeans about the impact that African consciousness had in culture. Therefore, there was always an attempt to tone down, to dilute, to neutralize and weaken the message that was being given to the poor, the oppressed, the disadvantaged, and the exploited. And so there was always fear that because there is entertainment value and enjoyment in culture, and you're making people think by what you say to them, and you're placing that message in such an attractive, enjoyable, festive vehicle, the former slave masters feared that this consciousness may go too far. So you saw a series of attempts to attack the transmission of positive influences to African people through African culture, in particular calypso music. So in the 1880s, the British banned the African drum. Imagine banning African people from playing African drums. Because some of you black people may still not be too sure about the power of the African drum, but I can assure you that the Europeans were mindful at all times that those drums can invoke spirits. Now hold up. When I say spirits, I'm not talking about what you're thinking about in regards to obeah and voodoo or African spiritual science, because that is too deep for some of you to even understand, so we won't even go in the direction of that discussion. But when I say that African drums can invoke spirits, I'm talking about the spirit of rebellion, the spirit of liberation, the spirit of the ancestors who struggled before, and the motivation and inspiration that can be drawn from their biographies and be applied in the modern day 21st century context to give us drive and motivation and inspiration to continue in our contemporary struggles. So the African drum invoked the spirit of achievement for a people to rise up and challenge a system of oppression. And those African drums were not just music, but they sent messages. There was the talking drum. And the talking drum, even though it may not have been verbalizing an actual language, it was transmitting a means of communication through the passion that was in it and the fact that it told the story of our heritage and our history. So even though you, as I say, you black people may not understand or appreciate the value of the African drum, the Europeans did. And they went so far as to ban the African drum. Then, after they banned the African drum, through the creativity of African people, we went into the bamboo patch, cut out the bamboo, and eventually created the tambour bamboo. And then from the tambour bamboo came the steel pan. And now the steel pan, a worldwide instrument, the only new instrument of its stature created in the 20th century, a product of African people of Trinidad and Tobago. The steel pan was another expression of that great talent and creativity and genius of African people going way back. So now, in the 21st century, let's look at where we are. All right. We have competitions. And what I believe is taking place is that because the stakes are so high, whereas we went from tens of thousands of dollars up to prize money of millions of dollars, there will be a much higher degree of sensitivity in regards to judging such competitions. And what we are witnessing as well is that the government tends to take front and center stage as the benefactor of this prize money, or the distributor, the well-wisher. And it is almost as if you get the sense that the government is taking money out of their personal pockets to give to our artists and entertainers and calypsonians and musicians who have won these competitions. So you actually hear people in government now making predictions about who's going to win a competition. Then the person who's judging has that now in the back of his head. Wait a minute, you mean the Prime Minister has a preference? You mean the Attorney General has a preference? You mean this Minister of Government has a preference? And now I'm sitting down as a judge. And I definitely want to be called back next year as a judge. So then certain questions now have to be raised. Starting with, well, how come these ties take place for first place? I mean, what is the mathematical probability for a tie to take place? Why not a tie for 12th place? Why not a tie for 7th or a tie for 4th? Why a tie for first place? What is the likelihood of that happening? I mean, mathematically, statistically. Why first place? And now it seems as if there's an attempt to silence voices of truth. We've already seen it in the media over the last 2 years in particular. So many people have spoken out for truth and liberation for black people, speaking out against injustice on the part of the government, regardless of which government it may be. People who speak truth to power being made to lose their jobs, being targeted, being victims of vicious and malicious plotting on the part of government officials. This overemphasis and oversensitivity in regards to the government being criticized. And so, over the last 2 years, they have made so many attempts to pay off so many Calypsonians, so many writers, teachers in the art form, examples of conscious individuals, icons. The government has been trying to buy them over, make them sell out, and then when they sell out, dangle them before the masses of their own people, and then say, well, look, this is one of your liberators, this is one of your thinkers, this is one of your philosophers in the art form of calypso music or culture and consciousness. Look at how we have bought him out. Look at how he has been bought and sold. And the subtle message is, we can buy and sell any of you. And when that message hits the people start to think, but wait a minute, I might as well sell out too. Or else I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to have a business, I'm going to lose my job. And when that starts to affect the culture, where people feel no longer obligated to teach the youth, inspire the nation, promote positive values, to share our history, to liberate the minds of the masses, and in particular, to the young children, give and offer some kind of inspiration that their people are a great people and can achieve and accomplish whatever they put their minds to. Collectively, as a struggle, we can all move forward together as soon as the artist decides that I must compromise and capitulate positive conscious messages in exchange for prize money or support from the government. Well, that is when you know that the culture is seriously in trouble.